Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Rutter, and I'm the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. I'm joined today by Michael Bronstein, who is the president of ATACH, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it.
It's great having you here because we have so much going on both nationally and here in New Jersey, and you wear multiple hats, right? So you're heavily engaged with what's going on in New Jersey, and you're part of the steering committee for NJCAN 2020. I do want to talk about that, but before we get into what's going on in Jersey, I'd love to get your thoughts on the national outlook. So just give us a little bit about your background, Michael, and ATACH, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Michael Bronstein, the president of the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, and we are a leading 501c6 trade organization that is dedicated to promoting the expansion and protection of the legal sales of cannabis and hemp for medical, adult, and industrial use. ATACH has been recognized nationally. It was named Trade Association of the Year by Campaigns and Elections magazine, beat out a lot of other really established DC trade associations on that, as well as Corporate Grassroots Organization of the Year by Campaigns and Elections magazine over the last couple of years. And the things that we've been doing have only really grown. Our membership is comprised of some of the most influential businesses in the industry, as well as 14 organizational MOU relationships that we have either with state level organizations, but also other national organizations as well. And we work together to promote the protection and expansion of the legal market. So it's been a very busy year, very busy couple of years for us on this. We're about to announce a number of agreements that we've put in place, and have been very excited about the work that's been going on nationally, as well as the implications that it could have for New Jersey as we move into this election cycle and as we move forward. There are a couple things that we're watching really closely at the national level, to be sure. One is, obviously there's been a lot of talk about safe banking and whether or not it'll make whether or not it would have made a coronavirus relief bill, and some of the efforts that have been going on along that issue. There's been some progress, I would say, in the discussion around it, though the prospects of passing anything prior to this election the window is very much narrowing for anything. But I would say that some of the progress that's been made over the year and over the last couple of years on that issue, but also on other issues that we continue to care about. 280E continues to be a big problem inside the industry.
Why don't you pause on that for a second? Because 280E is something obviously we're very familiar with, but a lot of people who are just entering into the cannabis space are not really familiar with what 280E is and some of the challenges that they will face as trying to start up a cannabis company. So what's 280E and what does that mean to the average person?
Yeah, so the IRS has taken the stance. 280E is a rule that's being applied to the industry where in matters of taxation, you are not allowed to deduct business expenses because right now the federal government, from a taxation standpoint of view, views marijuana businesses as illegal at the federal level, and have to do with trafficking, what they would say trafficking a Schedule I drug. So they've misapplied this law, this rule across the industry, and quite frankly, it's been it's really terrible for the industry. It doesn't acknowledge the facts. It doesn't acknowledge the facts on the ground of the lawful and legal industry that we're looking to expand, as well as what's gone on at the state level in terms of legalizing businesses. So those who are entering the industry often find that when they're going to do their taxes, it becomes really problematic for them, especially when they realize that most of the profits in these businesses, it's just very hard to function the way that tax law is being applied to the industry right now. And quite frankly, there very much needs to be movement on this issue, and the federal government has this completely wrong.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, Michael. And one of the things that so Michael, just for all disclosure, Michael and I sit on the steering committee for NJCAN 2020, and I've really got to know Michael more these past couple of months than I have in the past few years. So Michael and I would see each other at different trade shows and conferences and have great conversations. But just working on a day-to-day basis, Michael, one of the things that really impressed me about your group, about ATACH, is you bring decision makers to the table. I was part of a couple different phone calls. You had Republican Senator, Rand Paul, and you had some others on there. Tell us about just some of your outreach, because I think that was more with regard to Safe Banking Act and States Act. So tell us a little bit about, more on how you were interfacing at the federal level with those decision makers and some of the key priorities. So Safe Banking, States Act, MORE Act, that type of thing.
Well, the thing that we're most, the thing that as an organization we're most interested in doing at the federal level has been putting in a regulatory framework as well as standards development in these areas, because one of the things that we're seeing is that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the state level marketplace that has happened, and short of federal legalization, if that's with the burdens that we see at the federal level, what we need is constructive, coordinated conversation amongst states, and that's something that we've been looking to facilitate. And to the extent that that facilitates up into federal concern and federal response with what we've seen at the state level, those are the things that we find ourselves interested in. So those who are operating in market to market, on the East Coast, what we find is that there are regulatory structures and frameworks that are put in place that look like they're patchwork. Whereas if you're operating in one state or another, or you're just operating in one state but need to see sensible regulation, those are the types of things that we're very interested in on a day-to-day basis. We have a memorandum of understanding with ASTM International, which is one of the largest standards bodies in the world. It was a historic agreement when we signed it. And we're right now working on marketplace standards through those committees, as well as engaging regulatory agencies, state attorneys general, and state lawmakers on a number of those issues. So to the extent that we're running into bumps as markets are rolling out, or we're running into regulatory issues that we see that are consistent across the board, that's where national coordination, I think, becomes extremely important. On banking, what we found was we were doing work along with the Policy Center for Public Health and Safety, which is a 501c4 that works with state attorneys general, that we were finding that as we were talking to the state attorneys general, that they were very that didn't matter which party they were in necessarily, Republican, Democrat alike, that at the state level, there's a functioning market that needs to be taken care of. And in order to track money in the system, and not about industry accommodation or protecting consumer health and safety, that the need for banking really was there. So the state attorneys general, we helped facilitate and coordinate advocacy around the state attorneys general putting together a letter, which I think became, for groups that are working on the Hill, for federal legalization and banking, became a very powerful tool in the toolbox to be able to walk into a congressional office and say, hey, the state attorneys general have said, we need banking, right? And so
you were able to secure a significant amount of signatures, right? I mean, was it all 33, 34? Or
it was over 30. Yeah, it was definitely over 30. It was
great.
Definitely over 30 signatures. And in order for a letter like that to be sent out by the attorneys general associations, you need to command a very strong majority support. Otherwise, like, people really need to be in favor of it. So I think that letter, and that was the second letter that they wrote, by the way. They had written one previously as well. I think that support, it was extremely strong to see the chief law enforcement officials in each state that were in charge of regulation come together and say, we want to see Congress act.
Yeah, and it's represented about 2/3 of all the attorneys general in the United States. And I think the more and more that we're seeing that the advancements that we're seeing leaders of both parties, law enforcement officials especially, wanting to legalize and regulate this. We're seeing that's a very positive thing, and it's often reflected in polling. So one of the things we're seeing nationally is, I saw it was last year, polling, by the way, has been consistently in the 60s, 60% approval rating nationally for a very long time. But we saw for the first time on the Republican side, as a Republican, I was really proud to see a lot of my brethren out there. So we just hit above the 50% mark for the very first time in polling history for legalization efforts. How are you seeing polling playing out? You represent other states, just nationally, but also in some of the states that you represent.
Well, one of the things that we find, quite frankly, is that the elected officials usually are much further behind than the public can be, especially rank and file,
Right.
and not to, like usually on some issues, and there are people, to be sure, are leading this charge that are in legislatures, and they understand the issue. But the broader public really has moved on this issue. It's just, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support for, there's certainly, like, look, if you're against the medical use of marijuana right now, like that has about an 80 to a 90% approval rating. It would be very hard to find somebody who doesn't understand the medical benefit of medical marijuana. And with adult use, now we're pushing up to where there's a good solid majority of Americans that are for this. And when you start pushing, 60% or in the 60s, or, you start looking at, the upper end of these numbers here, that really should be a cause for action. And what I'm starting to see privately is lawmakers and legislators, they're hearing this a little bit more. I think the conversations are different than the conversations that we would have in states, 3-4 years ago, or even just a couple years ago. They do understand that there is some movement, and that's not something that we had really seen. But I remember early on, in the early days of the association, when we were talking about medical marijuana laws, at a time where, maybe the public polling wasn't necessarily where it is right now, what we would find is that public opinion would move, and it would shift very quickly, and the issue would gain a lot of momentum. And we're seeing this in states, and we're seeing this all over the country. So there is a much broader understanding of the public with this issue than there might be with legislative and lawmakers. But I do think that they're coming online, and we are going to see more action on key pieces of policy here.
Yeah, and we need to, right? I mean, it's a very valid point. I mean, a lot of elected officials, they're concerned. They represent a very diverse voting cross-section of voters, right? So they want to know that they're just not going to get ahead of the voters. They want to know where the voters are. And I know I have participated, I know you have participated in a lot of different community settings where they invite you out. And it's just about education. It's not about pushing a specific issue, but it is about education. It's the medical efficacy, the social justice issues, the business and economic opportunities. So, we've been doing a lot of this stuff in New Jersey for quite some time. But this is the big year here for the Garden State, so talking about polling, poll came out, a couple of weeks ago that was absolutely terrific, showed a significant amount of support. The New Jersey NJCAN 2020, they'll be doing their own polling as well. And a big part of that is making sure that the messages that go out to different communities are solid, right? So we know that suburban or urban voters still care about this issue, but they may come at it from a different direction. So getting out the vote efforts and making sure that this becomes like a voter by mail or an absentee ballot or limited polling stations, that people are educated on how to fill this out. So what are some of your thoughts on what you've been seeing, and how do you reflect on what the challenges, historic challenges going on in every state, but in New Jersey for this campaign?
So in New Jersey in particular, one of the challenges around the campaign, and even though the polling has looked really good, nothing is a slam dunk, I would say. And I think it's very important to engage, and we need to run a robust campaign in New Jersey to make adult use legalization happen. And remember, well, I think that a lot of the reason why we're at a ballot initiative is because the legislature was looking to get input from the general public about where it was that they were, which is why we went to the ballot to begin with. And what we're seeing now is the public polling that's been released so far has showed wide support. The thing that I think as a political professional looking at it that makes me is something that we have to account for is, people can say that they're for the ballot initiative, but when you look at dropping off voting and down a ballot, it may be that when somebody is filling out a mostly vote by mail ballot, that they may go to the presidential race, which is going on, vote. Then there'll be some drop off into the congressional race, right? And then there'll be some drop off into the other thing. So by the time they move to a ballot measure, how much drop off would we see amongst voters that would be more likely to support legalization and the ballot measure? And those are things that I think we constantly take a look at in the nitty gritty of election results. So even if we were a congressional race, we'd be concerned about drop off. And I think as a campaign and trying to move this ballot initiative, that's something that we want to look at. Now, New Jersey's had vote by mail now for several election cycles, no excuse absentee voting. They were one of the first states on the East Coast. This is more of a West Coast phenomenon to do vote by mail. So, New Jersey, Maryland was one of the states that had liberalized their laws. And you still if you look at the vestiges of these old voting systems, Pennsylvania literally just this year went to no excuse absentee balloting, which is now a vote by mail system. So New Jerseyans have had experience in this, and the real thing that we're looking at is this idea that the people who are there and are for it, which is a large majority, go all the way down the ballot and vote for the
Right.
question.
And that's critical. And where it's going to be placed on the ballot, front page, back page, all those things, and making sure that people see the whole ballot. They vote all the way down. And what Michael's talking about the drop off, typically and particularly in ballot questions between a presidential election, and by the time you get down to the actual ballot question, about 1 million people stop voting along the way. So they may vote for president, may vote for senator, may vote for Congress, and then they stop at freeholder, the local mayor, or something. They don't continue all the way down because they may not recognize those names. But this is such a historic election, such a historic campaign. It's extraordinarily important that all of us are getting out, doing our best to get out the vote efforts. And Michael being part of this team, it's been terrific what you bring from a ATACH perspective, what you bring just from a campaign perspective as well. Any last thoughts? I know we're running up against the clock here, but any last thoughts you have for ATACH, the campaign, or national?
Yeah, well, I wanted to firstly also, I wanted to thank you for the work that you've done on the ground in New Jersey as well, and the association has done on the ground for the work. I mean, Scott, I've been to every hearing, and you've been at every hearing there testifying, and I also think your voice as a former legislator, as a former mayor, as an office holder, as somebody who's had to be accountable to the electorate, it lends a lot of credibility. And a strong voice there. And I think that from an industry perspective, we need industry to be involved in this campaign. And I've appreciated the leadership role that you've brought to this as well, and the thoughtfulness that you've brought to this. And from my perspective, when we look at the campaign, we're dealing with economic opportunity in New Jersey that's unparalleled in any other industry right now. If we do go if we are able to pass this ballot measure, we're looking at a number of different things that are going to benefit New Jerseyans every day on the ground. It's just that would just happen as a matter of course through adult use cannabis legalization. So as members of the industry, I think it's important that we set up a responsible industry, one that is understanding of the state that we're in New Jersey, and one that's one that everybody can be proud of. And I think that we are well on our way with the industry involvement that we have with the current set of permit holders that are doing great things in the marketplace. And I suspect that this campaign and through this campaign and these efforts, we're going to see the strength and the responsiveness of industry and their ability to create jobs and revenue for the state.
I mean, that's a big part. I mean, just think about one issue that can resolve some social justice concerns, one issue that can create jobs and create entrepreneurs and all the ancillary opportunities that come with that. I mean, it will be a significant jolt in our economic arm, but also all the other positive things that come with legalizing cannabis. And we've seen state after state, they've gone through legalization process, things have gotten better. Teenage use has gone down. DUIs have gone down. So we're going to hear a lot of rhetoric coming out from the opposition. We're starting to already hear it right now in other states. Certainly we're going to hear it here in New Jersey. But again, we have to be transparent. We have to be truthful with the issues. And we're going to just use the facts to win the day. And also with talented people like you, Michael, and the rest of your ATACH team and the rest of the NJCAN 2020 team, which I'm a proud member of. So Michael, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And we will be talking more as we get closer. So thanks, buddy. Talk soon.
Looking forward to it. See you soon.